Okay, so let's start. We have today 283 people registered, and now a bit over 90 has come on to the live webinar. I think that's more or less the percentage we can count on these days. People know that this is being recorded. So after the webinar is recorded, we will publish it on our YouTube channel. And as usual, the webinar is automatically captioned. So please use the CC button to get the captions or transcript. All the microphones are muted to avoid background noise, and we will provide a short presentation followed by the Q&A. And if you would like to ask a question, then please use the Q&A function and save the chat for any sharing of links or technical support. And I have my colleague Stefan here with me today to answer to any technical questions and also post some links during the webinar. So we are going to talk about the European standards supporting the European Accessibility Act today. And my name is Susanna Loren. I'm the Managing Director and Chair of the Funka Foundation, and I'm also the current chair of the ETSI Senelec e-Accessibility Joint Technical Body, which is the group mandated by the Commission to create and update standards for the European Accessibility Act. And my job is to make sure that people reach consensus and that we move forward on the standards. I'm also the IAAP and G3 ICT representative to the EU. If we start with what standards are, there is a definition where you can say that standards, they are a good way to lose friends and put family asleep. It takes a long time to work with standards, but standards are everywhere. Many things that we do not think about are standardized. The height of our chairs and tables, and the reason we can just take out our dishing machine and buy a new one and it will fit into the kitchen because there is a standardized measurement and all of that. And of course, all the sockets, we know when standards don't work, if they are only local or country-based. So when you travel, you still need to have different equipment to be able to get electricity in some other countries. So that is when the standards are not global. That is what happens. The users need to kind of bridge the lack of a common standard. And of course, for industry that provides gadgets that needs electricity, they need to provide more than one cable and so on. So standards are good for the consumers, and it's a good way to make sure that businesses can provide the same type of products and services across countries. So it's a really positive thing. And standards are based on consensus. Different stakeholders meet and discuss. It takes time, but usually it becomes something that is useful for everyone. And in accessibility, standards are key because if we didn't have standards, which are of course the minimum, not to say that accessibility standards means following them means that everything is perfect. Absolutely not. But those are the baselines, and if we didn't have those standards as the fundamental requirements, then everyone who wanted to design or develop anything would need to do thousands of user tests to make sure that every assistive technology in every version of every browser and with every user need would fit and would work together with your product. So standards are actually very, very important. In Europe, the standards are voluntary. You are welcome to follow them, and they are supportive to businesses or organizations who like to meet legal requirements, of course. But you are allowed to meet requirements in another way if you prefer to do that. And if you can just prove that you're actually matching the requirements in another way than what the standard provides, then that's absolutely fine. Many people mix those things up and think that the standard is the law and the other way around, but they are two distinctly different items. We sometimes work with mandated standards, and a mandate is when the European Commission asks the standardization bodies to work together, often at least together, to update or provide standards that can support legislation. So those standards are slightly different because it's the legislator who says, hey, now we need to do this. We need a standard to support this legislation. So that makes them a bit more, have a more weight, if you like. But they're still voluntary. And standards that are harmonized means that they act as what is called presumed conformance, and that is when there is a clear connection to the legal part. So if the standard is published in something called the official journal of the European Union, that is when that connection is made to the law. So that means when the standard, it's not only a stable draft or kind of published somewhere, it needs to be published in the official journal. And that means that if you now meet those there is technical specifications in the standard, then you can be quite sure that you're also meeting the minimum requirements of the legislation. That is the presumed conformance. So when it comes to the European Accessibility Act, there is a mandate, so a standardization request from the European Commission, and that mandate is called 587. That's how many mandates there have been before this. But the mandate 587 contains the request for standards to support the Act. And in this case, it's the three standardization organizations, ETSI, CEN, and CENELEC, together that needs to work on this. And in this assignment, we, the standardization organizations, are set to review three existing standards. It's the EN 301549, maybe the most known of our standards in Europe, which has to do with products and services. So it's called Accessibility Requirements for ICT Products and Services. And this standard has been out there for quite a while. It was originally developed to support the procurement directive, and then we updated it, of course, and then we added an annex to act as presumed conformance for the web accessibility directive, and now we will add another annex that will act as presumed conformance for the Accessibility Act. So this is a long-term friend in Europe, but it's getting more and more weight when it's kind of connected to more and more legislation. It's also a very successful standard in that it has been exported to other parts of the world. So now our European norm, the EN 301549, is not only a harmonized standard, but it's also a standard in Australia, Kenya, Mexico, Canada, and so forth, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the main standard, if you will, the mothership, somebody called it yesterday. I thought that was very, very nice. And then we are also set to review another standard, which is called EN 17161. It's the Design for All standard. So this is quite different. It's a standard on the procedure or the process, and it's called Design for All, Accessibility Following a Design for All approach in products, goods, and services, extending the range of users. So it's a standard where organizations get help to implement the concept of design for all, and in doing that in their workflows and processes, then all their designs and developments and product designs will result in accessibility. So it's quite different. The third existing standard that we are reviewing currently is the EN 17210, and that is a standard on the built environment called Accessibility and Usability of the Built Environment Functional Requirements. This has always, both of them have been around for a while, and the built environment so far standard hasn't had specific measurements because that has been standardized at national level. But now this is being part of the European Accessibility Act mandate 587, and that means that member state that opts in and decides to also include the built environment for the services in scope in their transposition of the European Accessibility Act, they will have the same requirements and technical specifications also for the built environment. And as if that wasn't enough, we are also developing 3 new standards. And these standards are, these are topics or themes that are already, there are already chapters in the, or clauses in the EN 301549 mentioning this, but now we are developing new standards from scratch to really make sure that we work through thoroughly all the different details and aspects of these things. So it's a standard on non-digital information. And this, I think, is something that many people forget when it comes to the Accessibility Act, that also packaging and instructions and so on, that's also required for products, so non-digital information, and that is why we need a new standard to support that. There are also requirements for support services that need to provide information about the accessibility features and also provide this information in an accessible way. So I think many companies do not understand that their support service need to be accessible with the Act, and we are developing a new standard to support the support services to be accessible as well. And the third new standard developed is the standard on emergency communications, which is for the emergency calls to 112, for example. So those three completely new standards are being developed, and the existing standards are being reviewed. And if that wasn't enough, we are also combining two existing technical reports into one, and those are guidelines to support public procurement. So we had technical reports which are informative documents and not normative but informative already since 2014, I believe, and one on accessibility award criteria and one on conformity assessment. And this new technical report will be called the TR 101551, Guidelines for Public Procurement of ICT Products and Services in the European Union, Accessibility Award Criteria and Conformity Assessment. Like a world championship in long names. But it is a very interesting document and hopefully also useful for public procurers. And the connection between the Accessibility Act and public procurement is, of course, as we all know, that the procurement directive in the latest update from 2016-17, where the accessibility requirements are increased. So moving from when it is possible, accessibility requirements should be taken into account, into the newer version where it says that when the procured is being used by humans, then accessibility requirements shall be taken into account. So I'm simplifying the legal text here, but those are the biggest changes, that we moved away from when it's possible to whenever it's used by humans. It says natural persons, but it means humans. And we moved from should to shall, which is just one word, but it's a really big difference. And the other thing that that was updated in the Public Procurement Directive was that it says that when there is technical requirements in a union law, then those requirements are the one that should be used for public procurement. And ta-da, in 1 month, we have an applicable Accessibility Act, which means that all the requirements that are placed in the Act, in Annex 1 of this law, those are the ones that public procurers are supposed to use. So even if the European Accessibility Act is not addressing public bodies specifically, it's addressing anyone providing the services and products and services in scope of the Act, it still has an impact on public procurers as well. So that is quite interesting. So this report is also being, combined into one report and also reviewed and updated. Outside of the mandate is another standard that is kind of in the family of standards that is needed to support European Accessibility Act, and that's the EPUB 3.3. So this standard is already existing, and it's kind of outside of the European standardization organizations, but it's still very important because of the e-book part of the Act. So what is happening now? We are approaching quickly to the date where this is supposed to happen. We are waking up on the 29th of June, everyone, and suddenly everything is accessible around us, maybe. Or people and organizations are starting to get a bit worried because time is moving fast. But in reality, this legislation was published and kind of marketed, promoted, decided, and actually entered into force in April 2019. So it's 6 years since this happened, and anyone who follows European policy and legislation would know that this is actually going to happen in 2025. At that time, it felt so far away. But anyone waking up now saying, oh, I had no idea about this, well, you could have known about this if you would have been interested. So the timeline, because we have an issue with the standards not really being ready, even if the law is applicable in 1 month. So the time plan for this, and I want to say that this is what we know today. It can change, and don't shoot me if it does. But what we know today is, or the plan is, for the EN 301549 to be ready either in February 2026, or if we do get a lot of technical comments in the second comment round, then it would probably need to be postponed already to the autumn of 2026. But if everything goes well, we can have this the standard finished in February 26. The EN 17161 will be ready in July 2026, and the EN 17210 is planned for December 2026. Here there is a risk for further delay, and that is similar to the 301549, is that the funding is up, so there is no more money in those two groups for paying experts to do the job, which means that the special task forces and all the other experts working are now doing it completely voluntary, and that may mean that it takes longer. So I would personally think that the 17210 may be even further delayed. The new standard on non-digital information and the new standard on support services are both planned for May 2027. And the emergency communication standard will be published in January 2027. I think that is quite stable, and it's also within the original date, so there's no delay there. And also the technical report will be ready in March 2026, which is also within the original timeline of the mandate. And the reason this is happening is that it was a delay from the beginning, and depending on who you ask, you can place who is responsible for this delay may differ depending on who you ask. But here we are, we have a delay already, and we will continue to have that delay. It is not possible to speed it up more than is already done. Everyone is working as much as they can and trying to make this happen. So this is what we have to work with. But the law is applicable from the 28th of June this year. So you can't just fall asleep and say, well, the standards are not there, so we're not doing anything. That's not happening. So while we're waiting, don't panic, don't be angry, don't scream, and do not say we cannot do anything, because again, the standards are voluntary support. The actual accessibility requirements are in the Act. So in Annex 1 of the European Accessibility Act, there are all the requirements that you need. There are general requirements for products and services, and there are particular requirements for specific product and specific services. So it's all there. We also already know that in the next version of the EN 301549, WCAG 2.2 will be implemented. So you can already now start following 2.2. And you can also follow the work on the EN 301549 in the GitLab. And I hope that Stefan can provide the link to the 301549 GitLab. So even if you're not part of a formal standardization group, you can still follow what is happening there. You can see the latest draft, and you can also make comments. So we did get some criticism earlier on in the previous mandate that we were not transparent. But now, as a chair, I'm very happy to say that we are now much more transparent, and you can follow the work as it's happening live. So you still have things to do, and there's a lot of things in the 301549 already now, basic things that won't change, and you can also see in what direction it's going. So there are things to do, and you can also work on the reports, of course, and all of that. So my recommendation, instead of panicking, is to take one step at a time. If you haven't started working on accessibility, then do it now. And usually the first thing is to make an analysis, look at the current state of what internal resources is needed. I see that is something happened on the slide there, but really, do we have internal resources to solve the problems and remediate, or do we need external suppliers? Those are things that you need to analyze and think about. And then the next step is usually something about competence, either training your own staff, maybe even providing IAAP certification, or making sure that the suppliers that you take in, that they are certified or otherwise proven their competence. And none of this will be successful if you don't have buy-in from your management. So somebody with a budget and decision-making power needs to understand that accessibility is important and that you need time and resources to work on it. Something that many organizations fail in doing is to build accessibility into the processes and procedures. It's important to not see accessibility as a one-off project, but rather something that need to be worked on every day. It's a journey, people say, but really to have accessibility testing and requirements and all of that in the workflow, document what you're doing, and make sure that you know which standards or requirements to follow. You can also follow IAAP EU in the questions and answers activity on LinkedIn. There is a LinkedIn specific showcase page called linkedin.com/showcase/EAA questions and answer. It's super long. I'm also showing a QR code here, and I think Stefan will provide the link as well. We are looking into each of the articles of the law every week. So and describing what it means in human language. And then there's an opportunity to ask questions, and the questions are responded to on Thursdays, and once every month there is a webinar. The webinar is members only, but there's also you can take the opportunity to become a member or just follow the activities on LinkedIn. And if you want to know more about the standards, unfortunately, all the standard organizations are not super good at communicating every step of what is happening, and it's also different groups and so on. So my recommendation would be to subscribe to our newsletter and or follow us on LinkedIn, and we have the links again in the chat and QR codes on the slide, because we will try to make sure that we keep you updated on what is happening when it comes to the standards ongoing. So let's see if I let that be there. I don't think I have any more slides, do I? No, I have a question slide. So I'll let that be. And I will see what questions we've had. We just have a couple of minutes. So which country has the highest penalty? Yeah. Okay. So the competent authorities surveilling organizations, products and services in scope of the Act are not there to police and punish. There are penalties, so the law has a stick, but the competent authorities are there to support organizations. So talk to them and make sure that you ask questions and get some help from them. If a penalty is it will be a discussion, and you will have time to remediate and so on. So it's not like they just go, oh, you have an accessibility mistake, bang, here's the penalty. That's not how it works. So there will be a back and forth and communication, of course. But if a penalty would be the case, the highest one is from Hungary. It's 1,250,000 euros. And Luxembourg has the highest, I think the maximum is 1 million. And then Sweden has the equivalent of almost 1 million as well. We have another currency, but it's very close. So there are some quite high penalties in some other member states, but that's not, don't think that should be the reason for panic. Rather make sure not to have a problem instead. And there are also 2 countries where you can risk going to prison, but nobody knows who is going to be imprisonated. You can't, I don't think they can put the whole company in prison. So that's interesting. But try to be accessible instead would be my recommendation. Can you provide more details on the reasons for the delay? How can it be allowed to bring on laws without the foundational information needed to comply. No, I do not want to say more about the reasons. There are two parties. There are the standardization organizations and there are the commission, and they need to negotiate. And depending on who you ask, you will have different answers, I think, to why this happened. But the legislator can, of course, decide on legislation. That's a democratic process. And as the requirements are in the law, the standards are just voluntary. So I think it's nothing fishy or strange that it's not allowed. I mean, it's unfortunate, and I think everyone can agree on that. But this is where we are today. And fortunately enough, you can read the requirements already in the Act. So no reason for panicking. And do we have to report to authorities in each member state we do business in? Well, so there are different kinds of documentations and reporting depending on if you're claiming disproportionate burden or fundamental alteration, or if you are kind of only providing information on your accessibility. So that's a kind of a longer response to that. Maybe ask it in LinkedIn so we can put it into the series. I think that would be useful for many to hear. But in general, if there is there is coordination between the different member states. So you shouldn't have to have an ongoing conflict, so to speak, or complaints process in 27 member states in parallel. That's not the idea. So in one member state where somebody is complaining or the competent authority has been proactively surveilled or monitored your product or service and realized that something is not perfectly accessible, then they should tell the other member states so that the other member states know that this is ongoing. It's not the idea that every economic operator should have 27 different contacts. That would be crazy. But there are some requirements on before you place something on the market that you have to, and if you want to claim fundamental alteration, for example, then you do need to provide that information to the relevant competent authorities and those are different in different countries and so on. How can we ensure the compliance of our service with each country if we don't know yet the requirements of each country? Well, that is, we know the requirements of each country because the requirements are in the Accessibility Act. The requirements are exactly the same in all countries. So there is no flexibility there. This is a directive, which means that the law is transposed into national law. The laws are already in place and the requirements do not change. What can change is the level of penalties, for example, and also which competent authorities have the responsibility for surveilling the different sectors of the market. That can change, but the requirements are all the same in all countries. So that is not a problem. Okay, so that is what we had time for today. It's now 2:00, so we need to wrap up. But thank you for listening, and also do contact us if you are interested in training or user testing. We do specific training for specific roles to meet the requirements of the Accessibility Act for different sectors and so on. So that is what we're focusing on mostly these days. So do reach out if you need more information or if you want us to do user testing or audits or just supporting your teams. Happy to do that as well. And with that, I hope you have a very nice rest of your afternoon. And I can see that Stefan shared also the links to our website where we have listed these standards as well. So thank you, Stefan. That's very good. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.